Either one of you go first.
Oh, Laurie, you go first. Alphabetical. You go first.
Okay, that's fair. Right. I'm Laurie Davenport. As Twina said, I'm the Director of Development and Outreach for Tacoma Pro Bono Community Lawyers. And I have been doing this for 20 years with this organization, except I just recently became the non-director. I'm moving into things like social media and being on Facebook Live and stuff like that. And that's good, because one of the things that we have struggled with over the 20 years is that people don't know about us. They don't understand what civil legal aid is, why it's important, and why they need to know about it. So I'm very happy to be in this role. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Laurie.
And my name is Maralise Quan, and I am the lucky human being who gets to be the director of the Center for Dialogue and Resolution. And for your guests who are watching this, they might find it strange that we are an organization that invites people in conflict through our front door as much as we can, or on the telephone or Zoom. And that means they don't always show up in their best selves, but they really are aware that it's through dialogue they're going to be able to solve the conflict they thought of, but often it's the relationship. And what I love just looking at the faces that this is the numbers of relationships that are just show up on Straight Talk over these 28 weeks of building that, strengthening who we are and how we're going to address this difficult situation, which is the pandemic.
Thank you, Maralise. So as we do every week, I want to check in with each of you, including Pam and Tawana, and Rob also, to see simply how you are holding up today. And one of the things that Pam has taught me is the gift of silence and letting the spirit move you as it does to speak. So as your moderator, I will not be calling on you. I will just let the spirit lead you.
I can kick us off. I mean, tonight we're talking about gratitude, and I always try to show my gratitude and try to find, the numerous things that I'm grateful for, and always looking for the silver lining. I think I am anticipating how different this week will be. I know not everyone celebrates holidays, not everyone celebrates Thanksgiving, but nonetheless, at this time, we do typically spend time with family in person. And so it is taken, disciplined and responsibility to call up family to say, we're just going to be in our house and be home, because I anticipate a lot of folks will not make the same decision, even though that's the guidance, because it's so hard. And we all do work a lot throughout the year. And then we have these moments, these breaks to spend time with family. And so it's going to take a lot of restraint, a lot of discipline to say, because of COVID and the rise in cases, and because it is getting closer and closer, and it is family and friends that we know, and not just someone who has COVID and we see them on TV. So it will take a lot of discipline, but I had to, tell friends who were like, can I see you during this break? Like, I'm not seeing anyone, my family, we made a pact to just stay in our bubble, and just to, be really disciplined so we can do our part, and because we want to be healthy. So it breaks my heart to be away, but already, today my staff and I jumped into a social Zoom call and had lunch with each other, and we just have to do things different, and be thankful that I'm thankful that I'm here another day. I get to talk to family and friends in a different way, but I know a lot of folks will be challenged, and a lot of folks will just simply be naughty this week and not listen to that guidance. But I just challenge everyone to consider others and to consider family, and to recognize this is just a moment. And my heart also goes out to folks who, don't have family, or who are away, or who spend a lot of time alone. And so these moments are the only time when they get to, not be alone. So I know it's challenging, and I won't pretend to understand everyone's situation, but my heart goes out to all of those folks and all of those circumstances. And I look forward to spending a different holiday season here in my house.
Today, one thing that felt good, there were a lot of things that just felt like I was trying to squeeze things in over and over and over, and then something else would show up and squeeze itself in. But one thing felt really good, that we started planning our Zoom Christmas celebration, holiday celebration for our staff. We usually have a big one, and we invite everyone that we work with, and it's a big deal. And we usually have Uncle Therm brings us some soul food, and everybody has a great time. And we're not going to get to do any of that. You know, I might order some takeout from Uncle Therm because I live by the restaurant. But other than that, if what feels good is to be really intentionally trying to figure out how to make things feel good, how to touch people, because we just can't do it in the normal way. And I'm so proud of our staff for sticking with all the restrictions that we have to have, because we can't stop. We have to see clients. We have to keep our office open. We have to go to court. We have to do stuff that needs to happen, but we don't get to do any of the fun stuff. We don't get to, you know, talk in the hall without masks on, or so being intentional about trying to make things really work feels good. And it feels like maybe that's something we could do at other times a little bit more, rather than just kind of bumping through stuff and complaining like we sometimes do. So that's the one big thing that feels good today, besides sitting here next to my dog, which always feels good.
I would like to echo what Laurie just said. That really, really resonated with me. When you are doing so much, you have so much to do, and knowing that you are doing the work you are called to do, and it has purpose. And sometimes it feels as though there's just not enough. You can't do enough fast enough. That's like something that I frequently wrestle with. And I will say that I am grateful that I am called to do this work. One of the things that my faith mentor said to me is that your calling is, your ministry is twofold. It's both within the walls and it's out in the community. And so I'm grateful to have that calling and to be able to walk in that calling.
I am holding gratefulness for my two grandsons who, over 21 years, it was 21 years ago that my youngest, who is 6, brought me back to the United States and was worried about my cultural reentry. And when we talked about how easy it is for us to just stay virtual and connect, we remembered, you know, him being 7 and doing math problems, and his brother, who is 5 years older, we were dealing with English problems. We have had a virtual life since I moved back to this country. And it was yesterday that we kind of just put a name on it. And somehow that kind of brings a calmness and a peace to say, wow, for 21 years, I've been preparing for this long distance kind of life, and how to show love and how to be involved with others' lives, even though they are distant. So I hold both of them in my heart close, and the news from Guatemala is extremely difficult and heartfelt, just really hard to swallow. But to know that those two souls are part of who I am and what I bring today.
And I bring gratitude and feel grateful that although I've had friends and family members who have been sick with COVID, I know my situation. I feel very grateful that I haven't had friends or family members pass away from COVID yet. I realize that we have a winter ahead of us, and hope for vaccines that will make life to return to something that looks closer to a new normal next year. But I'm grateful for health and the opportunity, even if it's just over Zoom, to get together with people and to continue to do the kinds of work that we do at MDC.
Thank you, all of you. That was inspiring. And and a little teary for me as well. In our chat, somebody who I often love so much, hello Rosalie, that's my dog, but on Facebook, and that's Cece Mendoza. And she always has something beautiful to say, and she put a quote in here by Father Martin. And before I ask the next question, I want to put this quote in. It says, "Gratitude is the hinge on which the sober life swings. If I'm grateful for today's sobriety, I just bought tomorrow's." So with that in mind, I want to ask the question of Pam and Laurie, how do we define and cultivate gratitude during this time of merged crisis with COVID, systemic racism, and the toxic politics of 2020? And I'll let either one of you go first.
Did you intend to say Pam?
Nope. Did I say Pam?
Mhm.
I am so sorry.
I mean, I can answer it, but I'm sure that was for our guests.
I'll let either one of you go first. How's that?
Go right ahead, Laurie, kick us off.
Okay, so finding gratitude, I'm finding it really interesting. I think I'm grateful for change, because there are some things that have been revealed through this period of time we have been through, which has been in so many ways just frightening and almost impossible to deal with all at once, because there are so many things. But so much has been revealed that we live with and have lived with that is horrible, and that has been horrible for hundreds of years. And we have an opportunity, because it's been revealed, to start to do something about it in a different way. We can't not face it. We just can't turn away from it. And opportunities are being revealed in tiny ways, little small things, like the fact that because of COVID, we can't do in-person intake for our clients or in the office. So we have to do it online. And, lo and behold, that makes it a whole lot easier for people who are experiencing domestic violence, or people who live a long way away and can't take the bus because there isn't one, or whatever the issue is, but they can get hold of us by reading the QR code for our intake form on their phone and filling it out, and we get back to them right away. No personal danger, no transportation problems, no issues. So that's I hate the expression, it's a silver lining. Change is good. It makes us do things we didn't think we could do. We can all use technology better than we could a few months ago, kicking and screaming into the world. It's just, getting us all together around the table at 5 o'clock on Monday and having a lot of people pay attention to us. That's cool, and we might not have done that if it hadn't been for this. So, I like change, and it's very disruptive, and you have to find little things to hang on to in the midst of it. But I'm grateful for that.
And you had said that you worry about the silver lining as a phrase. We have chosen at the center to say we need to develop the habit or the skill of finding a silver lining. And yet there's a fear that maybe, especially if we're comparing ourselves to other, how can I be happy for what I have when others have so little? And so there was a phrase that I have kept with me all day as I think about this conversation and I think about this week. I feel that to a certain degree, to be healthy in the midst of this pandemic, we need to embrace grief. Grief for the 250,000 souls that we have lost in this nation when we shouldn't have. If we had taken other measures, many of them would still be alive. Grief at how those numbers, even today, are so huge of those who are getting COVID. And as Rob said, and to a certain degree, those numbers are so huge, it's hard to wrap your head around the actual impact of when one soul is lost, how you feel. My mother died. I lost the capacity to short-term memory loss, just grief took over. So when you ask about how do we define gratitude in these times, I think one of the powerful things is to embrace that aspect of grief and let that motivate us to not sugarcoat it, but to truly find the opportunity to change, which is what Laurie is saying. That aspect of, well, 21 years ago, my grandson moved me to Seattle, Washington, and there was tear gas on the streets. It was WTO. And when we were on the bus to go back home, which we lived on Beacon Hill, he said, wait a minute, where'd all the white faces go? Now all of a sudden the faces look like me because Quan is Chinese. I mean, he was aware of the systemic injustice in our system 21 years ago, but it's because he was from outside. Those of us living here get used to it, don't see it unless you are personally affected by it, and then the grief gets overwhelming. So I guess that's sort of what, and so I wanted to share a phrase that Amanda actually shared with me that I think it can inform, and maybe my next answers won't be quite so long. It's from Wells, a famous Francis Wells, who is a famous psychotherapist, who actually considers himself an activist of the soul. Which I think is an interesting title to give yourself. Makes me want to go read more. But I think that it's powerful as we think about this week of all weeks. The work of a mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in another, to be stretched by them. How much sorrow can I hold? How much gratitude can I carry? If I carry only grief, I will bend towards cynicism and despair. If only gratitude, I'll become saccharine and won't develop compassion for others' suffering. Grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which will make compassion possible. And when I read that this morning, it just impacted me of the subject of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, both of you.
Hey, Amanda, I
Yes,
just want to step in and I want to acknowledge the beauty and the weightiness of what Maralise just said. And I, full transparency, I was just like, Amanda, she's stepping all over my emotions right now with what she's saying. And I mean, just real life, dealing with some things that bring grave sorrow, wow. And in order to really fully appreciate gratitude and to be grateful, you must process through that. So thank you. Thank you for that. Was really very timely and profound.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Pam. So Maralise and Laurie, do you have ideas that you can share tonight about the steps that we can take to cultivate gratitude in our homes, but also in our community?
I'll kick it off, Laurie, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Habit, a mental health habit. It is proven that if every single day you find 3 things in your life to be grateful with, you will rewire your brain. As you deal with grief, and you let those grave aspects come into your life, you need to also feed your brain with moments of gratitude. And even a deep breath of life is really, so it has to become a habit. And I remember the very first meeting, I actually got to sit next to Twina. I saw her with anybody who sat next to her in a meeting, you know, she's got a great planner in front of her and she has a spot that she starts the day, there it is, with her gratitude and the gratitude after. And I was just in that moment doing a course on compassionate conversations. And so I've started since that day, since the day I met you, Twan, I've been doing it. But it is a habit which requires discipline, which requires focus, which requires consistency, like 28 weeks of straight talk. The last one I wanted to offer is choice. Our brains on a regular good day, not in a global pandemic while we're worried about everything in the universe, will always focus on the negative. When you get feedback of the 9 things you did great, all you hear is the 1 thing you screwed up. That's all you can hear. So we need to take a choice and say, I choose to see in this situation, which is an obstacle to me getting where I want to go, and so I'm upset, what is the opportunity to learn, and I will be stronger and more ready for tomorrow. So I just, to make it simple, I was trying to keep things simple, make a habit of gratitude, and then remind yourself when you feel the negativity, there's a choice there, and how do you reframe it into an opportunity?
You just kind of did a really great segue for me. My whole thing has been, and I think it's been really valuable, replace the negative with the positive, along the same lines as what you were just saying. I tend to, no matter how much power or influence I might have, I don't think I do. And I think a lot of people are that way. I want to make something happen. It doesn't happen. I get discouraged. I get negative. I think that happens to a lot of people. You can't let yourself do that. You can't let yourself do that in a relationship that's important. In our communities, we have to just focus on what positive things we can do with each other. If it doesn't work, come back, try it again, communicate in a positive way. It's been shown, for instance, that if you post things on social media, positive posts get tons of attention, negative posts don't. People respond. People will respond to you, and the feeling will carry you into whatever you want to do. The ways to do those things are exactly what Maralise is saying. Just you have to develop habits that are going to make you do something positive every day, consciously, intentionally, and it's going to happen. You're going to get through it. It's just too easy to be negative, which is it leads nowhere.
And I don't think I can express like how true and how important their words are. A lot of folks have seen or read or heard my story and, ask how I've overcome just abuse and homelessness and, living in shelters and, being, experiencing foster care, all these different things. And even as an adult, like life is not without challenge. I have, several kids who have their challenges, which I inherit. And then life, I just ran an incredibly difficult campaign, not without challenge. And I think what I try to explain to folks is the one thing that I always do when I say, even when I lived in a shelter, I still volunteered as a teenager. I still knew that I had something to give back. I had time to help others, to show my gratitude, to know that at least I had a roof over my head and there was something I could do for someone else. And I really try to explain to people that when life feels the lowest for me, what I jump deeply into is showing gratitude. I literally surround myself with note cards, thank you notes, stationery. And when I feel the most challenged in life, I begin writing people notes just to say, thank you, I'm thinking of you, texting friends to say, I love you. Like that literally is such a simple thing, cost-free thing to walk by somebody and say, I'm grateful for you. And I can't even explain the impact. I can just tell you it works to show someone else gratitude. And I tell my kids, especially now, I don't want them to skip over the emotion. Maralise is right. We do want to be honest about the grieving that we're experiencing. And when we recommitted to abiding by the guidance of this new shutdown, I told my kids, you absolutely get to say this sucks. You absolutely get to say this is horrible. Like, what the heck? I can't just go down the street and play Xbox. Like, you absolutely get to say this is stupid, right? And then we have to be grateful for our health, and that 9 months of this pandemic, no one in our household has, contracted COVID, that we have been, really disciplined, and that we have not been the cause of someone else getting sick. So, and we have kept our family intact, and look at all the good things that we've done, surviving the spring remote learning, and now, working really hard. The kids are working really hard to, with this fall remote learning, but just finding things to be grateful for, and the new skills that they've learned and developed, college level skills at such young ages, having to be so independent in their schooling and learning without a lot of practice. But I first like to tell folks to build that gratitude muscle. It's not to skip over this sucks and this is sad and this makes me upset. We want to be honest about that. We just can't stay there. We got to get to, I am also grateful for these things that are going well, right? Because I think for myself, I just don't want to end up ever in this depression of focusing on just what's negative, because I truly don't believe everything is bad. Everything is, if I'm up telling you the story of it, I'm grateful that I'm here another day on this earth. Like that's one thing. Here I am to tell you how horrible yesterday was. But it's just finding those moments of like, I'm so thankful. And if I can't find it in my life, Pam, I'm happy for you. Amanda, I'm happy for you. Congratulations, Rob. Maralise, that was awesome. Good job, Laurie. But it's like you have to put that positivity, in my opinion, in the atmosphere, and surround yourself with it. Read it, look at it, share it on social media, tell it to others so that you can be able to move forward and not just be stuck.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's soul food in its purest form from all of you. Thank you, thank you. This next question, and I don't know if Maralise is going to answer it or Laurie, but I know the two of you will know which one's going to answer it. I want to ask the question. Maralise taught me about this, and it's something that has stayed with me, and that is trauma-informed decisions. And so first for our audience, I want to ask the question, what are trauma-informed decisions and what do they look like?
If you don't mind, I'm going to go forward to go back because I think we need to define what is trauma, if you don't mind. And I spent a little bit of time. So trauma is really simple. Trauma is basically a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. But what's amazing is if you look at trauma and you look, there's acute, there's chronic, and there's complex. I have spent a lot of time dealing with acute trauma coming out of a war zone, and also the work that I do with the traumatically brain injured who also come out of a variety of different wars. And that's a single stressful or dangerous event. Chronic trauma is the result of repeated and prolonged exposure of highly stressful events. And that can be bullying, that can be domestic violence, that can be when we live in a situation that is constantly giving us these disturbing events. So those seem pretty overwhelming. But then we get into complex trauma, and that's the result of exposure to multiple traumatic events. And what I would like to say is there is not one human being on this globe, and maybe there's an island in the Pacific, I'm not sure, who is not impacted by this global trauma. And so if what we're talking about is trauma-informed decisions, we need to wrap our arms around what happens with us when we experience trauma. Think of it. It is a distressing or disturbing event. We are afraid for our survival. And I think the easiest way to look at this is to say we as human beings have been genetically selected to be hyper aware of threats to our survival. The easiest way for me to do it is we're sitting around the fire outside our wonderful cave, and anybody who actually heard the whistling of the grass and the movement in the grass and thought of a great poem to talk about how that grass sounded, well, that person was eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And we lost that whole part of the population, and the rest of us are left with a genetic predisposition to be constantly scanning our environment to figure out, is it safe? Is my survival in danger? And I point to the back of my head because that is where the amygdala lives. That is where it produces the amazing cortisol and adrenaline that allows a mother to do unbelievable physical feats to save a child. It allows all of us to continue to survive because we've got that adrenaline running through us. And it has a huge impact on our decision making. Because when we're thinking back here, we got three basic strategies. We've got fight, adversarial, which is kind of where Laurie and my lives are, in that adversarial legal world. We've got the absolute fright, want to run away. And then you have the frozen, just like completely the rabbit or the deer, you know, in headlights. To be able to make decisions, we have to transition from that survival to the frontal cortex, where we actually make our executive decision and we weigh things and we begin to consider. So trauma-informed decision is recognizing that we are living trauma, finding creative ways to calm ourselves down and to think about, is this immediate survival or is this long-term? And usually that can be solved with some really deep, profound, deep breaths. We can change our blood pressure. We can chemically make sure that adrenaline is now flowing and not just hyper focused on us. And the part that I wanted to share is when you are in survival mode, it's yes or no. It's bad or good. It's enemy or me. My survival means their not survival. We literally get into the us-them dichotomy. And a trauma-informed decision is recognizing, before we make decisions, let's come to a space where we can acknowledge and validate the trauma we've experienced, to be able to now begin to weigh what is the best path forward. And that's a lot of the work that the center has been working with people who are experiencing unstable housing, would be a way to say it, is how are you going to be able to calm down enough to be able to get into that frontal cortex. And we talk a lot about the value of having a thought partner. And a thought partner isn't thinking for you. A thought partner is creating the safe environment for you to take some deep breaths and understand, in this moment, I can creatively come up with some solutions and later on to implement them. So I kind of conflated your two questions of what happens to our brain and what is that trauma-informed decision-making, if that's helpful.
Very much so. Laurie, what would you like to add to that?
I think what I can add is kind of go in a practical way towards what we actually do, what our attorneys do, what our volunteers do, because it's actually very difficult. Everybody we work with has been through trauma, is going through trauma, has been shaped by trauma, probably from a very early age. Maralise, that was incredible. That's, I'm glad it's being recorded. It was great, because I mean, it affects all of us, but we specifically are, what we're dealing with is people who have had the courage to look for help through all of this. They've had to find a way to overcome this, to come to us and kind of hack through that to the point where they can say, okay, this is my problem and I need help with it. And we have to, in talking to them, we have to realize we're trying to get them to work with a system that doesn't recognize trauma, that seems, particularly to someone who is facing that, seems just arbitrary and not conducive to feeling good. Every time you come up against something, you're talking to a judge, you're having to fill out a paper and not understanding what you're really doing. You have to do things that you haven't done before. And that's multiplied if you don't speak English very well, if you don't read very well, and if in addition you have been suffering abuse and you're trying to figure out what to do about it. Our people who deal with those people have to be, from our point of view, trauma informed means we've got to constantly be mind melding with those people. What does this feel like to them? How can I make this possible for them? How can I make it feel like something that's going to lead them to a positive place? And I think the reason that we all stick with doing this is that when people get it, when they realize, oh, I can do this, I can find a place within me where I can go ahead with these steps and something will happen that I want to have happen, that I designed, that I confronted. And that's enormous. It's just huge for people. It changes your life. And so I think that's why we all keep doing it, even though it is really frustrating. I mean, all the numbers of people who don't show up, we know why they don't show up. They can't, for whatever reason, it's too much. So the people we get to help are the people who are the courageous ones. And how do we get it to everyone? It's a huge challenge. But that's what I think of when I think of trauma informed. We have to be experts in this, and we have to be experts in developing ourselves a way of confronting it when we're dealing with other people, which is really difficult because as we know, it leaks over to us. And pretty soon, after a whole day of trying to help people who are people who are homeless, people who are confronting things we never even could imagine, we have to figure out what in us can we use to make things work for them. So everything's frightening, it's creative, it's human, why we do it.
Wow. I'm sitting here now with a million more questions that we don't have time for. So we're going to have to do a part 2 to this on gratitude. In both of you, Laurie and Maralise, you described what happens to the individual when we go through trauma. And you gave us some great pointers of things that we have to do in order to try to get through it so we can be in a more informed place to make healthier decisions. I want to ask this question because we are entering the holiday season, and I'm going to ask you a question about the myth of Thanksgiving here in a second. But during the holiday season, I'll speak for myself, it's always a real feel-good time. My serotonin is up. I'm happy. I'm listening to music. I'm baking like a fiend. I'm decorating. And this year, that's not what I'm doing this year. This year, I'm not honoring those traditions. So when we think about other people in terms of the work that the two of you do, because the two of you are steeped in equity and promoting equity and dissolving racism within our community, how does trauma show up in other people that we have to recognize that sometimes is a head scratcher for us? I'll take the past 4 years. I've scratched my head so many times. I'm almost bald when it comes to the former administration. I don't understand. So what do you do when you have those head scratching moments where you go, I'm losing it. I don't understand your response here. And either one of you can jump in based upon the daily work you do.
You want to go for first, Laurie?
Oh, what do you do when circumstances just get to be too much? You can't deal with it. I think that's the moment where I really do think about gratitude in very basic ways, like, okay, I am really glad that I'm here. I've had some traumatic experiences myself over the last couple of years. Got through them, and I got to remember I'm really happy to be here. And the fact that I got through those things means that I'm strong, and it means that I'm strong enough, and recognize that I'm weak enough and strong enough. Maralise did a much better job of expressing that before. The grief has to be there, and the strength and determination to go ahead and be positive has to be there. They balance. Everything balances, and you got to remember that balance is there. And I have lots of little funny ways of remembering that, as I think probably everybody does, survival things. For me, if I can't see clearly, I know something's wrong. Because I'm an artist and I have to draw, and if I can do that, if I can draw something, visually get it under control, then I can confront it, and that's okay. So that's kind of what I do. Try try to balance, try to remember that I always have things to be grateful for and that I need to focus.
And I want to jump in before Marilee's answers and let our audience know, if you are an Instagram person like I am, Laurie Davenport has some of the most healing, beautiful pencil sketches that she does of people who are, as Marilise would say, unhoused, people who are on the street that don't have a coat. And they bring me to my knees with gratitude when I see them. Grateful for her artistic ability, grateful that she can see what others sometimes do not see. And also those pictures make me realize how fortunate I am. So Laurie, thank you for your beautiful gift of creativity and how it really brings me back to center.
Oh, thank you, Amanda.
Marilise, what would you add to that?
So it feels like your question was posed without getting political, but over the last few years, it has been hard to wrap your head around how half of our country, we're divided half and half, can look at the world the way they look at the world.
Mhm.
And how others are so crystal clear, as we're talking here on Straight Talk and saying, you can't hide these injustices. They are a reality and we must confront them and deal with them and build the new normal, I think as Rob said. I have to assume good intent in others because I think I would probably die. And so if I have to believe in good intent of others, if someone is expressing some anti-human belief that a certain group of people is supreme to another group of people, or that humans are supreme to the environment, or just that belief in supremacy, that somehow one is better than other, I have to realize they are in that amygdala that is hijacked and they are in their survival mode and they can't think clearly. If I'm lucky enough to be one-on-one, I tend to really listen completely. And I kind of, if any of you ever hung out with me, I can over listen and kind of freak people out by really repeating back, is this what you said? And then I can ask that one curious, open-ended, non-judgmental question to say, help me understand X. I'm never going to change another person. But if you cannot change another person, you can change your actions, which will change their reactions. And my hope is, I think Twina just said it, overwhelm people with positivity and it does come back to you. Overwhelm the person who believes one is supreme over another with respect and demand the dignity of self, which I think is probably my learning edge. I'm so used to being the facilitator and I don't have my identity as not on the table. I just was in an experience where we were facilitating. Both of us were insulted by one of the parties. One woman had the power to speak up and say, as facilitators, we're still human beings. And I was more like, I got to put up with it because that's part of the price of the job. So I think my learning edge in this world is to really hold on to my own dignity in every moment and be aware. But I do understand that this happens a lot. And I think that if I can just sort of cut through it with a few curious, non-judgmental questions and open up just a seed of a doubt.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Marilise, you said something that I want to tag on to, and that is that this is Straight Talk. And we talk about traditions that we don't understand why. We talk about waking up in our community. We talk about civil unrest. We talk about 400 years of racism. So I want to take this moment, and Laurie, I would have sent this article to you, but knowing you, you probably already have seen it, but I did send it to the rest of, I sent it to Twina and Pam and Rob, and also to Marilise. I want to talk about what is the myth of Thanksgiving that we continue to celebrate during this time of civil unrest. Marilise, I'll let you go first on that. And then Laurie, you can certainly, I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
And it's a day that started at 5:30 with looking at your Facebook. I haven't looked at any emails since then. So if you sent me an article, I can't quote it, but I'll go read it. That which is holy, that which has life-giving force, often is appropriated by someone who wants to impose upon another. So it's extremely, I mean, as I studied anthropology in Guatemala, the colonizer comes in and appropriates a holiday and then imposes their myth on it. But it gets us connected because there is some gracious holiness in that moment. So let's take a moment and think about October, November is the month of harvest, is the month of giving great happiness that we have a bounty, especially those of us luckier in the Northwest and our Native American brothers and sisters, literally gratitude and graciousness of this wonderful world we live in. That is what happens as human beings tied to nature. As we end a season and begin another, it is the harvest. That was then appropriated by those who came to the shores over 500 years ago. And the coming of the shores, so Native Americans had a relationship with nature, which was to enhance it, to make today a better day than it was yesterday, to really, what I take, I give back, a constant flow of synergy, as opposed to the Western culture that many of us recognize as our roots, has much more, what can I take from nature? What can I expropriate? What can I make mine because it's privatized? And so when we think about Thanksgiving, it is the colonial myth that we impose upon hungry people on the shores, or a bunch of weirdos in weird clothes and with white skin that wasn't very good, were hungry. And those who were near them saw them as visitors who were strange and smelly and probably annoying, and yet gifted part of the bounty. We then celebrate that in a completely misinterpreted way of, we have now taken over, we discovered them. So giving thanks to the universe and to the earth and what it has given to us is a wonderful transition. Today, my dad and I noticed a couple things. Today, we're at exactly sunrise, 7:26, sunset at 4:27. We've now hit the less than 8-hour day. That's a time for us to settle in and enjoy each other's company. And yet we celebrate it with the pilgrims imposing upon the indigenous. We impose about the colony. We impose about the genocide, the ethnocide. And so I believe it's very important to commemorate these moments and recognize. So truth giving has been a much easier word for me to have out, much better than friend giving. And since I was a kid, it's telling the truth of what is colonization and what is that history that we have. So I think that, but why is it so important, and why is it so embedded, and why do so many people do it? Because it's a time of year that we do want to give thanks for the bounty. So I guess that's sort of been appropriated a myth on a great holiday that should have existed and does exist. We just have to commemorate the fact that horrific things have happened, and what will we do today, tomorrow, and the next day to make it different.
Laurie, what are your thoughts on that?
I think our program we have a Native American legal aid program that's been funded by the Puyallup tribe. I think we're in our 4th year now. So through that, and just getting to know more members of the tribe, focusing on issues, just learning over that period of time. I think what your question makes me focus on the fact that the Native tradition, and it's not the Indians who met the Pilgrims, it's all over our country. It's here, it's the spirit of the potlatch. It's the Native Americans believe that, Thanksgiving is life. That's what we do. That's how we live. Thanksgiving, giving without expectation of getting anything back. And that Maralise said that as well. It's huge. Our culture that we come from, white colonist culture. My ancestors actually did come over on the Mayflower, believe it or not. That's us. Progress, taking, moving, building, all that kind of stuff. And that's so far away from the Native American thing of give, just give, be thankful and give. Don't expect to get anything in return. You probably will, but that's life. That's the way it should work. So it's embracing something that's really a long way away from the way most of us are used to thinking. And, speaking of kind of, it's not trauma, but it's background that it's more along the lines of thinking about implicit bias and, what's in there, what's inside of us that we're absolutely not aware of. That feeling that we need to always get something. We don't. And I think that the Native American piece of that has been kept in there because it's attractive, because it's something we want to embrace, even though we've done so many horrible things over the years. We still want a piece of that. And I think the best thing for us to do is just really embrace it and realize, okay, that's a way to live that makes sense. We can carry that through our lives. That's the real Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Laurie. And as Pam said, Rob, our good egg, has posted the New York Times article in the chat that talks about a point of view from our Native American brothers and sisters. And they call it takes-giving as opposed to Thanksgiving because of what has happened in this world. And I felt it was an important thing to bring up on Straight Talk because we took a lot from them, and there are a lot of reparations to be made to our brothers and sisters here in Washington State and everywhere. Speaking of home, I want to shift our conversation and to talk about something that is very important to all of us here, and Maralise and Laurie, you have partnered on this. We know that right now our housing moratoria in Washington State, and especially in Pierce County and in the city of Tacoma, is set to expire on December 31st. And the two of you and your organizations have come together and have started something called Free 253. And I know Rob will put that in the link also. Thank you, Rob. There he is. And I'm wondering, first off, for our audience, can you tell us what Free 253 is? And then can you also talk about the services that you are offering for people who are facing eviction and what your hopes are after December 31st? So I'll let any one of you, Maralise or Laurie, jump in and start the engine.
Well, as the woman who gave it its name, I think that Laurie should go first.
All right, Ms. Laurie.
I was in the meeting, I know.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Free 253. It's just so catchy. I mean, we've had a lot of people from other counties that don't have our area code really want to be part of Free 253 because it sounds so good. Free is the big word. I mean, if say you and I, Amanda, had a big dispute and wanted to go to dispute resolution, it would cost us. And although they do have a sliding scale, it's not something that's generally available to people who are facing eviction for free. So that's a huge deal. And we were so lucky to be able to get some funding from Pierce County Connected really in the beginning of when all this was happening. And Free 253 it's the dream team. It's Tacoma Pro Bono, it's Center for Dialogue and Resolution, and it's fair housing. And people say, well, why is fair housing part of this? Well, if you were sitting in our office, you would know. I mean, in a situation like this, people who are marginalized, who face barriers, say citizenship issues, language issues, things that are going to get in the way, things that people can take advantage of if they're so inclined. It's happening a lot. Just any crisis is going to cause things like that to happen. So it's really important that all three of these organizations are part of it. But basically what happens is whatever door you come through, and we recommend that you come through Tacoma Pro Bono because we're all kind of trying to keep track of who comes and who they are and that kind of thing. But the idea is, with the moratorium while it's going on, it's possible to create payment plans, even if you have rent. We encourage people to, back rent that you haven't paid. We encourage people to get it taken care of now, get a payment plan, even though you're not going to be evicted one way or the other for non-payment of rent, because you can't be, but get the payment plan together so you can stay, so it doesn't add up, so it doesn't get to the point where it's something that you can't afford. And the big part of making that happen, that payment plan, is bringing landlords and tenants together through mediation to write up a plan and get it happening so you can stay in your place. So that's the basic thing. And we love to get this stuff done while the moratorium is on. And of course, a lot of people don't have incentive to do anything until the moratorium ends. So we're just kind of playing a game right now of, gee, we'd really like you to come in, get some help, get it taken care of so that this is not an issue when the moratorium ends. We don't know for sure. It may end on December 31st. It may go to March. From what I've heard, I doubt that any kind of moratorium would be going past March 31st. Yeah, it's the 31st month. So that's kind of where we are right now. We also have the eviction resolution program, which is basically the same thing, which they copied from Free 253. But it's the same idea.
So I want to highlight that in this traumatized world where you may be listening to Straight Talk, or more than likely, those of you listening to Straight Talk, you know someone who is busy navigating unemployment or underemployment, 2 kids at home trying to get them online to be able to go to school, trying to figure out how you're going to feed everybody, and boy, they eat more when they're at home, and trying to figure out how you're going to go find a job that pays more. It's just one of the many plates you're spinning is, how do I pay the rent? And so one of the issues, and Laurie is the most amazing artist and outreach guru of getting Free 253 stuff in front of people. And yet, if you're in the midst of that trauma and you heard the governor say you don't have to worry until the 31st, it's like, okay, that's one thing I can let go today because I've got others. And I just want to say our county right now has more money than they expect to give out on rental assistance. So if you know a human being who is pulling all those plates, know that they're going to get the legal support that they need from Laurie. And yes, we're going to continue into next year. But right now, if we can add the rental assistance, we at the mediation table can help you establish a much better relationship with your landlord, so that if next year there's a little bit of hiccups and some more difficulties, you'll have lines of communication open with your landlord. So I just wanted to really insist that we're at this point now trying to reach what we call in-reach as opposed to outreach, which is to touch those trusted souls that someone has let you know that they're struggling. Please tell them. And so the other one that I would ask Rob, and I should have sent it to you, if you can, in the course of the next few minutes, get the portal for the county's rental assistance and put that up. In fact, we have found landlords can ask for rental assistance for their clients. Clients can ask for rental assistance, and then that can trigger the possibility of getting legal advice. I would still suggest getting legal advice, but I'd also like to highlight a story that one of Laurie's coworkers and I had this week, which is sometimes in the course of opening up dialogue, there's an obstacle to actually getting the rental assistance. And there's that feeling of you're knocking on a brick wall, you're hitting your head against a brick wall. Know that we're embracing our role, not only of sort of conflict coaching somebody how to talk to their landlord, or conciliation, just giving a phone call, or mediation. We're actually looking at this as, can we go back to the policymakers and say, hey, here's a whole group of people that are not being served because you've got a policy of eligibility. Can we make that change? And we successfully, in 22 emails later on Friday, changed an exception to a rule, and a family will be housed for the rest of the year in a place that's going to be safe and adjusted while they begin to figure out school online and going to get a new job, because as a really good job of a restaurant manager, not having the income to be able to cover things. So I just really want to reach out to each of you who somebody may be crying on their shoulder and saying they have difficulties. Take advantage of this rental assistance, but open the door for trauma-informed conversation that's going to tell you what are your legal rights and facilitate a safe conversation with the landlord.
And I want to point out that that rental assistance portal closes December 4th.
And thank you, Rob, for putting that in the chat as well. So as we are getting to the end of our program, and again, we got to have a part 2 on this because this has been so amazing. I want to close tonight's conversation on a hopeful note, and that is, can each of you share where you are finding hope right now?
I lived a trauma on Friday. I was standing, trying to get my little bit of looking out my window, and I saw the tents on Yakima burst into flames. I actually watched that happen. And I saw the solidarity of those who had a tent nearby pulling people out. I saw the solidarity that we've been doing for the last 6 months of neighbors trying to figure out a way to help coming out and calling the police and calling the fire. I was able to call many of our partners to say, look, they're going to put out the fire, but what about the human beings? What are we going to do to support the human beings who have just lost a few of their only possessions? And I happen to know, I mean, they live on my street. I know them. One of them's got a TV with a car battery. The last place he lived was a really nice apartment, and that's what he's got left. That the hope is there is human solidarity. We do care for each other. We do help each other. So in this world where we all have to redefine what is being home and what is my home going to look like for 24 different families or households, a tent right now on Yakima is their home, and they are making it the best they can with each other and supporting each other. And so I have hope that we can increase that human solidarity and do more. But that's where I find hope.
Thank you, Maralise. Laurie.
Same for me. I find it in partnerships, the partnerships like Free 253 that have developed through all this, that are getting stronger and stronger. I've been this year starting to attend the Coalition to End Homelessness. I find that group so inspiring, so powerful. People are so dedicated to really making something happen, not just we're coming to talk about this problem and then we go home and have lunch. It's really serious. The partnerships are getting stronger, and that just makes me feel good every day. I think it's incredibly powerful.
Thank you for that, Laurie. Before I ask Pam to drive us home and tuck us in, Pam or Twina or Rob, do you want to weigh in on where you're finding hope right now?
I am definitely finding hope in innovation and just the evolution of solutions to a lot of the problems we're facing. I know that Tacoma Public Schools is working with students who still don't have connection to Wi-Fi or reliable Wi-Fi, or younger primary age children who still don't have laptops for school. So they're publicly broadcasting school curriculum and inviting in community partners. But just to think about in general how effective of a solution and strategy that is to offer public education on public TV so kids can, watch it in a different way. But just the innovation of working together in a different way to solve this problem of our students don't have the resources they need to work remotely, but they deserve to have a quality education and have access to what their peers are learning. So I'm finding a lot of hope in the innovation that's surrounding us during these very challenging times.
Thank you, Twina.
And I would say I'm finding hope in our community. in the resilience that our community has shown over the last 9 months. You know, collectively, we've gone through a lot. And I think that our community continues to ask hard questions and to show that we care.
All right, Ms. Pam.
Yes, ma'am. So I will say that the thing that I have always loved about Tacoma and Pierce County is the resilience and the willingness to come together and figure out how to resolve hard things. It's what I have always noticed about this community and loved about this community. So I always find hope in collaboration and partnership. Even in the midst of something that we've never experienced before, there is always hope. I think the most before this pandemic, the thing that was just most traumatizing for us was probably 911. And look at how people rallied together across every kind of divide. Just people, we came together, and that's really where you see the true spirit of humanity come forth. And that is what I find hope in. That's what I am always inspired and encouraged by. So on that note, I just want to say to everyone, thank you for being here this evening. Earlier in the chat, I just made one comment to everyone. I said, this is the most beautiful conversation. It really has been, and it's not because it's the season or whatever, but it was just really heartfelt and expressing of how we seek out gratitude, being grateful, and also about being truthful in the environment that we find ourselves in. So I just want to say thank you to Laurie, to Maralise, to Amanda, to Twina, and to Rob for being here and for sharing of your time and of yourselves this evening. And for everyone who joined in, whether you are listening on Zoom or Facebook, thank you as well for being here. And everyone, have a good night.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks, everyone.